Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we are on Season 3, Episode 13, entitled Life Support. This episode aired January 30th, 1995. Before we talk about this one, anything to say about the previous episode, Past Tense, Part 2?
No, it was perfect.
Also known as Why Are There Ghostbusters in Star Trek?
Yes, and the future uses exclusively old Mac fonts.
Funny how that works.
Yeah, in a future episode, there is a reference back to it.
Oh, okay.
But I'm not going to give you any spoilers.
I mean, they did change history, so I guess I'm not surprised. Should we talk about this episode?
Absolutely, I'm ready.
In the cold open, Jake is walking through the promenade when a young girl named Leanne calls to him. We learn that she's recently broken up with her boyfriend and she's got some interest in Jake and invites him to dinner. I mean, she's ready to move on, I guess.
And she's much more age appropriate.
Well, we'll talk about that. Jake's got plans with Nog, but would rather go on a date with a cute girl. So this actress is actually 2 years older than the woman who played Marta.
Okay, that's funny.
I know, but she looks considerably younger, so
Yep.
I don't know what to think here. I mean, is she playing younger because she looks so young, or is it just even more horrifying how they made up Marta to look older and more sexualized, even though she was incredibly young? I don't know. That episode still gives me a creepy vibe.
She appears to be human as well.
Yeah, I had written down in my notes that she was a Bajoran, and then I went, wait a minute, she's not a Bajoran, she looks human. Yeah, she doesn't have the nose.
Oh, maybe she's a Bajoran who broke her nose.
Maybe. It does seem that you're supposed to believe that these two are the same age.
Yeah.
This is Lark Voorhees. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce her last name, but she's quite recognizable as Lisa from Saved by the Bell.
I've never watched this show. I have no idea what the reference is.
Not a show you watched. I don't think that show probably aired in the UK when you were a kid. I don't know. It was like a Saturday morning show.
Ah, okay.
Well, just then, Odo, Miles, and some security dudes come running out of security, telling people to get out of their way. They rush to an airlock where a Bajoran transport is arriving. When Bashir and his nurse arrive, Miles tells them there was an accident on board and there are casualties. There was a loose plasma coil on board and they couldn't beam people through the radiation. I thought that was a little bit hand-wavy. It seems to me like there's a lot of radiation in the atmosphere of planets and they're beaming people through that all the time.
Hand wave, hand wave.
Yeah, it's a little bit flimsy, but they needed the drama for the story. Well, the airlock opens and a bunch of coughing Bajorans rush off of the shuttle, and then we see Kai Winn being helped out of the smoke. She tells Bashir to take care of the Vedek, and then we see some men carrying a very injured Vedek Bareil. His chest is very bloody and torn up, and he does not look good. When Odo sees this, he immediately calls Kira, and we get a quick shot of Kira in ops as she heads to the infirmary. And my main note here is how disappointing her hair looks.
Yes, she's changed her hair yet again.
I'm not sure what's happened to her normally amazing hair, but it's really flat, like the water is too soft or she ran out of product or something.
Oh.
I don't know. I did not like it. Or maybe she's been in a pandemic quarantine for a year and it just doesn't look good.
No access to hair care.
Yes. And we cue the theme song.
Wow. Winn came off that shuttle, coughing, and actually said, take care of the Vedek. She's thinking of someone else?
Well,
where is the real Kai Winn?
Yeah, but he also clearly took the brunt of whatever happened because he's completely bloody. Everybody else is just coughing. So.
Oh, he's the kind of guy who would jump in front of an exploding plasma conduit to save the Kai.
Yeah, I wondered about that, but they don't ever mention that. So I'm not sure if that's what happened. And there would have been witnesses to that because there were so many people on the shuttle, but I thought the same thing. Well, Kira is pacing nervously in the infirmary as a nurse patches up Kai Winn, who is out of her ugly gold robes, and she's looking quite radiant, I thought, in all white.
Very.
Miles comes in, reporting a molecular fracture in one of the plasma conduits. He says it was only a matter of time before it gave way. Once it collapsed, the entire relay system exploded. Kai Winn asks if it was sabotage, but Miles doesn't think so. Then she tells Sisko that she'd like to discuss things in private with him, so he helps her off the medical bed, and they head out of sickbay.
I found this was odd because she says emissary very genuinely.
Yes.
Previously, she's said it almost like she's tagging on the so-called emissary.
Well, she's definitely shaken.
Yeah.
Here at the beginning. And I think really throughout this episode, we see a little bit of a different Kai Winn at times.
Yeah. However, I also have a small theory here. I think this might be a tell. She uses emissary and says emissary to Sisko when she wants something, when she's trying to get something out of him.
Yeah, that could be. Does she call him that again in this episode? I don't think so.
I'm thinking back to the collaborator when she was trying to get his support, and she was calling him emissary very genuinely again. And this is the second time it's happened. I'm like, ooh, either it's a change in Winn or she wants something.
Well, she doesn't like to call him anything else.
Yeah.
She's devout, right? And at the very least, she appears to be. I don't know what's really in her heart, but she appears to always be following whatever her religion is telling her to follow. So I'm sure that she would feel the need to call him emissary and would not want to call him commander.
Right. But I feel she uses, when you say devout, I feel she uses her faith as a weapon.
Yeah. She's a different kind of devout than Kira.
Yes.
Although I do feel like she does feel like she's religious, and she is a true believer. I think she strongly believes in the prophets and strongly believes in her religion. She just does find ways to manipulate it and use it for her own benefit. I do believe that.
Yeah.
She probably believes everything so deep down that it's just part of her nature to use it as a tool anytime she's talking.
Yeah, I would agree with that. She sees herself completely as a conduit of the prophets, and what she wants clearly is guided by the prophets. So the religion, if you like, is almost following her.
Right.
And it's kind of like the Elixir thing where Sisko says, eventually you'll feel the hand of God on your shoulder comment.
Right.
Kai Winn is there. She justifies her decisions by, this is what the prophet wants.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Well, now we go to surgery, and Bashir is frantically trying to save Bariel. He and the nurse are dressed in the ridiculous Starfleet surgery outfits where everything is covered but their faces, which is just comically ridiculous.
Those are some great, wacky outfits.
So weird. With the square top on the head, and I don't know.
Yeah. I was expecting the nurse at any moment to say, do we have to wear these weird fetish suits?
Well, there are a bunch of medical things that happen here, including Bariel going into cardiac arrest. The nurse also questions one of the things that Bashir tells her to do at one point, so he's obviously trying everything he can to save him.
This is like a textbook medical drama. Take any TV medical drama, and this is that scene.
Yeah. Then we go to Sisko's office, and Kai Winn is back in her boring gold robes. She and Bariel were on the way to a secret meeting with a member of the Cardassian Central Command. They were trying to get a peace treaty signed, which takes Sisko by surprise. She says the prophets teach us that while violence can keep an enemy at bay, only peace can make him a friend. Bariel has been working on getting this meeting arranged for 5 months. They've been discussing reparations and even a formal apology from the Cardassians, all of which is very shocking.
Yeah.
Sisko says he never would have guessed that Kai Winn would be the one to bring such a bold vision of peace to Bajor, but she says a large share of the credit goes to Vedek Bareil. Without him, the talks would not have come this far. She says he's been a loyal and trustworthy aide to her. She even says she wouldn't have been as forgiving if the roles were reversed. She says he's guided them through the talks, and without him, the talks may not resume.
Okay, what is up here? My note says, what's Kai Winn getting out of this exactly?
Well, she would get the credit,
yeah.
Ultimately as being the leader when it happened, even if, because Bariel never takes credit for anything. So he would always fade into the background. So I think also maybe he's convinced her that this is a good thing. Maybe he's stroked her ego because he's pretty smart with her and knows how to talk to her.
I think so.
I assume he's convinced her that this is a thing that she should be doing. And so she's doing it. But also we see in this episode that she doesn't feel capable of doing it. Which is why this is just such an interesting episode with Kai Winn.
Yeah.
It's very different. But it doesn't feel out of character. It's just a little different, yeah.
Yeah.
Bad news down in the infirmary as Bashir tells Kira he did everything he could, but Bariel is gone. The radiation damage to his neural pathways was too extreme. Kira decides to head back to Ops, even though Bashir suggests that she take some time off.
Kira is so tough. She's straight back to work. There's no nonsense here.
Yeah, she tells him that she'll grieve in her own way, and off she goes.
To me, this is one of the ways you've mentioned before that maybe Kira is broken because she grew up fighting. And how many people did she lose? You end up with someone who's been kind of numbed to it, that it's just another casualty. And she can't afford to really grieve or be upset. Do you see what I mean?
Maybe, but yeah, I see what you mean. But it's also entirely possible that this happened so quickly, she just doesn't know how to react yet. This just came out of the blue. She didn't even know, I think, that he was on the transport.
Yeah.
And then,
Until
boom, he's gone.
Odo told her, yeah.
Yeah. So she didn't get an opportunity to see him or talk to him or anything, and it's just over, and she probably just hasn't processed it yet.
Interesting. I took it as part of that Kira's background of, if you like, this kind of thing would almost been beaten out of her because of the life she's lived.
Yeah, you can't fall apart.
Right.
You don't have that luxury. You have to get back to work, so.
Oh, that's a great way of putting it. Yeah, she's never had that luxury.
Yeah, the luxury of grieving. Wow. We go back to the surgery room, and they're ready to begin the autopsy. Bashir is looking at some scans of Bareil's brain, just as a neuron fires in his cerebral cortex. He's shocked to find that Bareil's nerves are still transmitting electrical impulses to his brain. And then we get some crazy medical talk about the radiation he was exposed to, fortifying his peripheral cell membranes. It's like,
Classic medical drama.
Aye.
Doctor, that could kill him. Is this an episode of House?
Yeah, there was a lot of that with the nurse cautioning something that Bashir was doing, and he does it anyway. Yeah. Well, since he's been in stasis, Bashir thinks he can regenerate the damaged pathways and revive him, even though he's been dead for so long. So then they start some work on his brain, and this is where the nurse was cautioning him.
Yeah.
But he keeps going and manages to zap Bareil awake, and he opens his eyes. That was a shocking turn that I did not see coming. And we go into the ad break. Kira, Kai Winn, and Sisko are standing over Bareil as Bashir says he's hoping he'll make a full recovery. Sisko says it's not every doctor who can lose a patient and then bring him back. Yeah.
Sisko is very impressed with Bashir here.
Definitely.
And even Winn seems surprisingly gracious and very grateful towards Bashir.
Oh, definitely.
That seems so out of character.
She seems quite relieved, just to have him alive. And then she says she wants to get the negotiations going because she's worried about losing momentum, so she wants the Cardassian legate to come to the station for the talks. Bashir cautions that Bareil is in no shape to negotiate, but she says he'll just be advising me and that she'll conduct the talks. Then they all leave Kira alone with Bareil for some chatting about Springball, and she seems quite relieved to have him back as he clutches her hand.
Oh, she seems so happy, which usually means things are going to turn out terribly for her.
Yeah.
Oh, Kira's happy. Yeah, what's bad's going to happen?
Yeah, it's like a soap opera. People can't be happy for too long.
Exactly.
Now in Sisko's quarters, Jake breaks the news to Nog that he has to cancel their plans. Nog is upset until he learns it's for a date. And then he horns his way into the date, asking if Leanne has a friend. He says either he'll be a third wheel or a double date. It was pretty funny how he did that.
Oh, dear.
So Jake is like, okay.
Poor, sweet, innocent Jake.
I know. He let himself be railroaded there.
Yeah, exactly. We all know that's a bad idea with Nog.
Oh, for sure. And also, Nog says, you're still pretty new to this dating business, so just promise not to embarrass me. And I think we all know what that means.
Yeah.
Back to the infirmary, and Bariel is advising Kai Winn. He says to put off discussing the Cardassians returning the orbs until diplomatic relations have been established. She argues about delaying the inevitable, but he feels that the peace process needs a chance to grow. She seems frustrated but agrees. Bashir comes in and Kai Winn leaves. Bariel sees a very serious look on Bashir's face because he's come to deliver some bad news. When he revived Bariel, he had to flood his nervous system with neurogenic radiation, and this is causing inadequate blood flow to his internal organs. Bashir wants to put him in stasis until he can find a solution, but he doesn't know for how long. Bariel does not agree because Bajor's future is still so fragile. Bashir really doesn't care about any of that. He has a duty to his patient. But Bariel's duty to Bajor is all that matters to him, so they agreed to the use of an experimental drug called Vasikin that can increase the blood flow, but it comes with a serious risk of damaging internal organs and even the brain. But it will allow him to function normally for a few days, so Bariel decides to take the risk against Bashir's advice. And you know this is not going to go well.
Does this have FDA approval?
I do not think so.
I think we're seeing the real difference here between Bariel and Winn. His comment, help me heal my people. It's the only thing that matters to me. He is completely selfless. As we saw in The Collaborator, personal ambition comes second to this guy.
Where she seems focused on getting the orbs back, which would make a big splash.
Right. That, I think, was telling when they brought up the orbs at the start, and then he ends up saying that he needs to heal his people. This guy will go to the extreme of he's literally willing to risk his own life to achieve a peace treaty.
And also when she agrees to it, he says something to her like, wise decision or something, as if she made the choice when he really was the one who did. Yeah, he knows how to work her.
I think you're right. She's driven very much by ego and ambition.
But also, a couple of episodes ago, it was in the one Fascination.
Yeah.
He said that the role had changed her. And he might be right. This might be an example of us seeing that, that she is actually open and making use of his advice. She doesn't have to, but she is. She's at least seeing value in it.
I think that might be a nice setup for this episode.
I think so. Yeah, I think that was a warning.
Right.
A foreshadowing.
Yes.
So Legate Tyrell has arrived at the station for negotiations, and Sisko is sitting in since Bareil is not able to, and they're debating the return of Bajoran prisoners, which the Cardassian says don't exist. So Sisko says, well, are there detainees? And he says, of course there are people being detained for crimes against the state, and somehow that's different.
I love this. Sisko totally gets the Cardassians.
Oh, yeah, he definitely does. It's all that time he spent with Dukat.
I think so. That they play these kind of word games.
Yeah.
Those aren't prisoners. Those are detainees.
Yeah, totally different.
Oh, don't you think that would be the nightmare of dealing with Cardassians? Subtleties of language would be exploited to the extreme.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to trust anything that they said. Even once they'd signed something, I wouldn't trust them. They're the least trustworthy people we know.
It would be word games and interpretation all the time.
Right. Well, this guy's making a point about all Cardassian property and equipment being returned to Cardassia as part of the reparations agreement, which Kai Winn doesn't quite understand but agrees to think about it. Isn't Deep Space Nine Cardassian property and equipment?
Yes. And things like the computer systems we've seen on the planet?
Yeah, all this equipment. Well, Kai Winn is clearly very uncomfortable and says she'll consider the offer. When he steps out of the room, she expresses concern that the Cardassian is up to something, and she doesn't know what. She's very frustrated to be doing this without Bariel, who has been doing the negotiating for months.
Yeah.
She says she was chosen by the prophets to lead Bajor into a new era, but she wasn't meant to be in a room with a Cardassian debating legalisms and diplomatic nuances.
I find this odd.
Yeah.
That Winn seems to be having so much trouble. This is a woman that we have seen before is a complete political maneuverer. She knows how to play these games. We've seen her.
Yeah, but if she wasn't in all the negotiations, that's the point that she's made.
Yeah.
Then she doesn't know all of the things that have been agreed to and all the conversations that have already been had. And this Cardassian is absolutely going to take advantage of that. And I think she knows that, and that's putting her on her back foot. I felt like this was kind of the first sign of Kai Winn, who doesn't feel super qualified in the moment that she's in. She feels like it's outside of her control. And I think that's making her really jittery.
So you think it's more insufficient briefings, that she doesn't have a good foundation on where the negotiations are?
I think that's certainly possible. She may have found a way to really rely on Bariel.
Yeah.
And then in his absence, whatever she's lacking would be really amplified. It's also entirely possible that this is not the job she signed up for. She signed up for the job of, hey, I am just going to be the face of this. I'm going to walk around in my fancy robes and be the Kai, and everybody will worship me. But underneath, there's a bit of an imposter syndrome going on. That's absolutely possible.
So what you're saying is she is the first person on this show that we've seen who can actually delegate.
I think so. I think she did it maybe too much.
Wow. I was wondering if this could be an act.
Well, it certainly could be with her, but we don't see that. They don't even give us a hint that it's an act. She seems quite genuine.
And that to me as well seems strange, that someone who literally could pivot instantly when she gets called out on something.
To protect herself.
Yes.
This is bigger than that.
You think so?
Yeah.
Okay. But I guess if she's been put completely on the back foot, maybe she would behave differently. I just find it difficult to see Kai Winn being put on the back foot.
Well, I find it really difficult to believe that people are just geniuses at everything, even if they're evil geniuses. It's just not realistic. It's much more realistic that she would have believed in someone else, in their negotiating skills, and thought she could get something out of it.
Yeah.
So she relied on him, and then when he disappeared, she didn't know what to do.
Okay.
Being great at everything is the thing that's not realistic.
Okay, I see your point here.
Well, before we leave this scene, she says if Bariel dies, peace with Cardassia will die with him.
No pressure.
But again, that's why I think she's relied on him completely. She has no idea what to do next. Well, now it's time for the double date, and it goes very badly. Nog doesn't think the girls should talk. They should just sit quietly and look beautiful. Then he tries to get his date to cut up his food for him, and it just really goes down the drain quickly from there, especially when he calls her dumb. The girls are not amused, and they leave.
Nog is the worst person you would want to take on a date with you.
Yeah.
Knowing absolutely anything about the Ferengis, which I'm sure Jake does by this point, why would you even want to go on a date with him?
Yeah, you must have talked about this before. It seems a little silly that it would come up here for the first time.
I guess it's because sweet, innocent Jake couldn't say no to his friend.
I guess. Well, Nog yells at Jake for treating his female as if she were an equal. Oh, how terrible. And Jake tells Nog he was acting like an idiot, and they each stomp off.
Yes.
It's
kind of the ultimate play on if you go on a date with a friend who is a complete jerk and you forget the fact that your friend is a complete jerk.
Or you hope maybe this time they won't be or something.
Yes.
But then they still are, and you're like, oh my God. Oh, that was terrible.
Yep.
In the infirmary, a very unwell Bariel is telling Kai Winn that the Cardassian is trying to bring back things that he rejected a long time ago. He's taking advantage of the situation, which I suppose is what any tough negotiator would do.
Oh, yeah.
But Bariel is really suffering and not able to continue talking. Winn tells Bashir that his attention is wandering and he needs more of the drug.
Oh.
Bashir declines and boots her from the room, which Kira supports.
Kick her ass, Kira.
Before she leaves, she tells Bariel to put himself in the hands of the prophets. She says, they will not forsake you.
Okay, now we start to see more of the real Winn here.
Yeah.
The way she says, give him more of the drug. She's clearly just using Bariel. People for her are just tools. In the same way as she used Neela in Hands of the Prophets, people are disposable assets.
Yeah, I guess so.
And I think that very clearly comes up here.
Also, though, she has no other tools. She doesn't know how to treat people any differently. She's never learned how to. That's not her personality. This is all she knows, is just to use people to get what she wants and needs. That's it. That's all she has.
And the Bajoran faith is a great way of manipulating people.
Yep. Well, Bashir runs some more scans and says the Vasican is damaging his internal organs. He can replace the damaged organs, which it's like, okay. I just thought that was so funny how easily he said that.
Maybe you could have started there.
Yeah. He says he can replace the damaged organs with artificial implants, but as long as he keeps taking the drug, the damage may spread. He again suggests putting Bariel into stasis, but he declines. He just wants to get through the negotiations to carry out the will of the prophets. Bashir looks very concerned as we go into the ad break.
I'd just like to point out, 100 years before this, Dr. McCoy gave a woman a pill and she grew a new kidney. So damaged organs should be repaired pretty easily by this point.
That's true. Yeah, he should have just given a couple of pills to him. The kidney pill, the lungs pill. No big deal. Bashir enters the conference room where Kai Winn is sitting. He tells her that he's replaced Bariel's organs and he should be awake soon. But he's come to tell her that she needs to release Bariel from his responsibilities in the negotiations. She very coldly says she needs him and she doesn't want to lie to him. Bashir tells her the only way for Bariel to survive is for him to be put in stasis. But he won't allow it as long as he feels this obligation to the negotiations. She says nobody wants Bariel to die, but his treatment is Bariel's decision. Bashir says yes, it is his choice, but he wants her to help change Bariel's mind. He tries a different tactic, saying, as the Kai, this can be her moment in history. But she says he's assuming success is guaranteed. And then he darkly says, oh, of course, if the talks fail, you want a scapegoat. And then he calls her a coward.
Oh, yeah.
That's as much insulting as she's willing to take. She says Bariel has made his decision and she's not going to interfere. When he starts to leave, she says she won't forget what was said here. And Bashir says, neither will I.
I like how she won't even respond to the accusation. And once again, we see one of those little threats that Winn will make. Oh, I won't forget what you said here.
Yeah, that's her fallback.
Yes. The thing that comes out here as well is that Bashir isn't intimidated by her. When he responds, neither will I, he's going to stand up for himself. I know everything's accelerated in TV land, but it's kind of funny the way Bashir very quickly has gone from sort of this fresh-faced newbie wanting to experience frontier medicine to almost this seasoned vet overnight.
Well, he started showing this version of himself in the episode The Wire, where he was willing to do anything for the patient, everything else out the window. And I think he's stuck to that.
Yeah.
I'm going to shock you by saying I think he's totally out of line.
Yeah.
Where does he actually get off calling her a coward in this situation? He doesn't have enough information to know what's going on. She expressed real trepidation about her ability to succeed in the negotiations, which is a thing for the whole planet, not just for her. He doesn't know that went on. He doesn't know any of that. I just think calling her a coward just seemed really off.
But at the same time, I think he's figuring out she wants somebody to take the blame if it doesn't work.
Right.
Perhaps it's inappropriate to call her a coward there. But I think it's a good take. Maybe not say it out loud, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, he's barking up the wrong tree. He should have had this conversation with Sisko.
Right. Yes.
And let Sisko try to help. Instead, he goes in like a bulldozer, and maybe this is a good example of him just, again, not understanding people and not having good emotional intelligence. This is not the right tactic. If you want something out of that woman, all you're going to do is get the opposite reaction, which is what he got.
Right. I do like it as well, how she says, that doesn't sound like a Starfleet officer.
Yeah.
My note on that was, is this Kai-splaining?
I don't know. Well, she's annoyed at that point, and because he's being kind of a jerk, and she's not used to people being jerks to her without just stomping on them. So, yeah, it's a whole thing.
It does also reinforce that Bashir is totally focused on the patient.
Oh, yeah, definitely. We certainly get that idea in this episode from the beginning. Now we go to the Sisko quarters, and Sisko is asking Jake about the double date. Jake said Nog embarrassed him, treating the girls like slaves. Sisko thinks it sounds like he was acting like a Ferengi, which is right.
That would be correct.
Well, Jake says his dad was probably right all along. Maybe humans and Ferengi can't be friends. But Sisko's like, you've proven me wrong. You have your cultural differences, but there's a real bond between you. Cultural differences?
But Sisko himself, the fact he's prepared to admit his mistakes and not obfuscate or deflect, but actually take responsibility for it, for his own words, and change his position. Do you think that's deliberate to show the difference between Sisko and Winn?
I think so.
Whereas Winn is somebody who, my mistakes are buried in a trench somewhere in Bajor.
I think so. I mean, that's a very common thing that they do on the show, to show contrasting people or relationships or situations. At the same time, Winn was pretty open and humble with Sisko.
Yeah.
She just wasn't with anyone else.
Oh, that's a good point.
But I don't want to lose sight of something here.
Okay.
This thing about cultural differences seems a little bit light for what this is about. Those girls are not a cultural difference. They're people. And either we treat people well or we don't.
Well, this is a little more of that Federation cultural relativism, which is cowardice.
Yeah, right. It shouldn't be okay with anyone for Ferengi to treat girls from another race this way. It's dumb. Sisko shouldn't just be like, oh, well, cultural differences. It was a human girl, and I don't know what race the other girl was, but it was not Ferengi. Somebody needs to stand up for those girls.
It's also bad for Ferengi
Jake
girls.
didn't even stand up for them. He just let them storm off angry, and he didn't even go and apologize or do anything. This is what I think Sisko should be saying to Jake. Maybe I ought to talk to those girls and tell them, hey, that's what the Ferengi do. I'm sorry, that's not what I believe in. That's not how I would treat you. I apologize. To me, that's a missing thing.
Maybe you should be talking to Nog about that.
When we get to the Nog conversation, I will bring it up again. But here, Sisko is the adult, and he many times is giving these great lessons to Jake, and I think he missed an opportunity here to give the right lesson. Instead, he's like, oh, he's your friend. Oh, it's great. No, it's not.
But this ties back to that Federation thing of, the cultures, they're all equally valid.
Right.
When you can poke rather large holes in cultures.
It's bad enough when it's their own culture. So now, here, we're talking about it crossing cultures. So it's one thing to support it when it's like, hey, that's on your planet, I can't do anything about it. I can do something about this, especially when it happened right in front of me.
Yeah.
I just don't like stuff like that. I also struggle anytime, I brought it up 1,000 times on the show, guys got to stand up for the women. That's the only way.
I understand how that would be annoying. It is a missed opportunity.
Yeah. We go back to the infirmary and Bariel is in severe distress. Kai Winn was talking to him, saying that Bariel had called her. Bashir pushes her out of the way, saying his brain is now irreversibly damaged. And we go into an ad break.
She was just grilling him.
She was. She definitely was. But she was like, oh, but he called me. I didn't call him.
People are just tools for the use thereof.
Now we're in Sisko's office, and Bashir is telling Kira, Kai Winn, and Sisko that Bariel isn't going to regain consciousness in his present condition. Kai Winn asks if he can replace parts of his brain like he replaced some organs. Bashir isn't so keen on this idea.
Winn is straight in with the keep him alive, start swapping bits of his brain out.
Do whatever you can. I don't care about him.
Yeah.
Sisko asks, what would Bariel want? Kai Winn says Bariel wanted the negotiations completed no matter the cost. When Bashir accuses her of being biased, Kira agrees with Winn.
Yeah.
She thinks Bariel would do anything to complete the negotiations.
Kira is unfortunately correct here, and she has to agree with Winn. This is Bariel's entire focus, so what can you do?
Well, Bashir cautions her that the man who wakes up with artificial brain parts may not be the man she knows now. Kira understands, but she knows that stasis is not what he wanted.
Yeah.
She tells him to do the surgery.
You also see that Winn really isn't such a great religious leader. If her take on this is, there's more at stake than one man's life.
Well, that's more of a political leader than a religious leader.
The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
Or the one.
It might be fine for Bariel to take that approach, that his life is less important than bringing peace to the whole of Bajor, but that's his take, not the religious leader Kai to say that.
Yeah, but I think he has made that clear. I think Kira is right.
Yeah.
It certainly shouldn't come from Kai Winn.
She would burn all of you to achieve her objectives.
Yeah, I'm afraid she would. Well, now we go to the promenade. Jake approaches Odo, saying he wants to be arrested. And then in the next scene, Jake is locked in a cell, and Odo drags Nog in, saying he has witnesses who claim they saw him and Jake breaking into the Tholian ambassador's quarters. Obviously, this is a ploy by Jake to get them locked in a room together, and it works.
Odo is in fine form.
He is.
Not as grumpy as normal, but...
Well, because it's all in play. The brain surgery is complete, and Bareil is awake. Bashir works awfully fast. Oh, that just cracks me up.
They have constructed Robo-Bareil.
Yeah. He's already awake, and Winn and Kira rush in to see him, but he is a bit chilly to them. He calls Kira Major and says everything feels different. He tells Winn he'll help with the negotiations.
Oh, they've really screwed him up. He really is Robo-Bareil.
I mean, he was already kind of robot-like. Now it's even worse. Down in the cell, Nog has figured out it's all a ruse because neither of their fathers are there to yell at them. Jake finally admits to the setup. He just wanted to apologize to Nog. He says he forgot he was a Ferengi. That cracked me up. He says, we spend so much time together, I sometimes forget we're different. And then they trade insults a little, and Nog talks about Ferengi females chewing their food for the males, which is just stupid. Jake says as they get older, these things are going to get worse, but he still wants to be friends. So they decide to just avoid double dating and learn to deal with each other's disgusting habits.
Yeah, I think Jake hits the nail on the head with, do you have any other disgusting Ferengi customs?
And he says tons of them, right? Nog.
Perhaps a better question would be, do you have any customs that are not revolting?
Yeah, I'm sure there are fewer.
This is that point that Jake missed the opportunity to maybe educate Nog a little bit, expand his horizons. You don't have to live in a backward culture.
Well, but you also don't have to treat everyone the way that you see people being treated on your home planet.
Yeah.
Even Quark doesn't do that. Quark doesn't tell Kira to cut up his food. He's learned to at least live out in the rest of the universe where people are different. Somebody needs to tell Nog this. He needs that lesson. It really frustrates me he doesn't get that lesson at all in this episode.
Yeah. Well, and he must have witnessed the world being treated differently.
Yeah, but he's kind of stupid. They don't play him as very smart.
Yeah. Maybe it's more sheltered than smart. He has only had to this point a very Ferengi view, his upbringing.
But even when he's had opportunities in the school, he didn't take advantage of them or wasn't able to.
Yeah.
So because he's not rewarded for anything at home, that makes it harder to want to change and grow.
Yeah.
But he's in that bar, and he should see the way that Quark has to deal with other people. Although, I don't know, maybe when they are not talking to others, Quark just is constantly harping on the old ways or the ways of the Ferengi homeworld.
Well, he is something of a traditionalist. We've seen that.
Yeah, maybe he does that in private, which would make sense. Okay. Well, the negotiations were a success, and Kai Winn announces the signing of the peace treaty. Some of the hardline elements from each side are unhappy, but it does look as though this is progress. There's a little celebration happening, but Bashir isn't in much of a celebratory mood. Dax tries to cheer him up, saying he kept Bariel alive against incredible odds. And then there's this goofy scene with Quark showing Kai Winn a chocolate souffle that he's created in her honor and named it after her. She says she's honored but declines to lick it from his finger. It was very weird and gross.
The dessert looked disgusting.
It's just like a pile of goo.
Yes. It is good that Quark has found a way to cash in on the Kai's popularity. I was impressed there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He said they were selling really well. His piles of goo. And then Bashir is called to the infirmary for an emergency. Well, in the infirmary, we find that the other half of Bareil's brain has now failed. Kira asks Bashir to do some more magic with a positronic matrix, but Bashir declines. He doesn't want to remove the last shred of humanity from his patient. Kai Winn tries to calm Kira, who accuses her of not caring anymore because she got what she needed.
She is very upset.
Kai Winn says she shares Kira's pain, but the prophets are calling to Bariel. She says Bashir will never forget him. And then she touches his chest and leaves. Kira begs Julian not to give up, but he won't do it. If he replaces the rest of his brain, he will look like Bariel and talk like Bariel, but he won't be Bariel. He tells her it's time to let him die, like a man, not a machine. He says to just let him go, and Kira gives up. He says he's probably got a few hours left, and Kira wants to stay with him. Then as the scene ends, Kira talks to Bariel alone. She says, "You got your peace treaty, but I wish we'd had more time." Then as she cries, she kisses him and starts talking about the day they met. It's very sad. The end.
Yes, and she tells him she loves him.
Yes. A lot of good that does now.
Well, that's always the problem.
Yeah. Well, that is the end of the episode. Would you care to do some overanalysis?
I think I have a little. So, perhaps surprisingly, I have something of a defense of Kai Winn.
Okay.
There is an old Bajoran proverb, only Nixon could go to China.
So only Bariel could go to Cardassia?
I'm speculating that perhaps Winn is the only one who could actually push these negotiations to even happen. She has political skills. She has absolute, complete self-assurance that she was chosen by the prophets, and what she does is the will of the prophets. So she could bulldoze any opposition.
Yeah. I have no further info on Kai Winn, so I don't know what happens in the future. I honestly don't know if she's even in another episode. To me, I just have what I've seen up till this point. Yeah. And I'm looking at it like they humanized her a little bit, brought her down to earth, and she was really in a situation she wasn't prepared for and didn't know how to do. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think she was having this imposter syndrome, but she wasn't willing to show that to anyone except for Sisko.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm looking at this so differently, as this was like a natural evolution to someone who got a job that they weren't ready for, that they're not really going to be good at.
Wow.
That's the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah, that's really different.
I think it's a failure of her own leadership skills. I just don't think she knows how to do it. I don't think she was prepared for this. I think Bariel was making this happen.
Yeah.
And she kind of fell apart. That's the way I viewed it.
That is really interesting, because that leads on to my second point, which is I'm honestly surprised that she would not be a great political negotiator. She's a ruthless politician at the end of the day.
But she was not successful.
Yeah.
She was not going to win that election. She had to do it by cheating.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
That's the way she won. She was not ready for it. The people weren't going to vote for her. She wasn't going to win.
Yes, right.
I just feel like she was not prepared for this and really shouldn't have this job, but she does.
Because she got it through subterfuge. First of all, she tried to kill Bariel, and then through manipulating a collaborator who wanted to return home. Okay.
But if she wants the people of Bajor to love her, and she's trying to build a legacy, she's going to try to go into these big things and make these big things happen, but she doesn't know how to do it. And she obviously realized that somewhere along the way. She didn't know how to do these negotiations, and so she let Bariel do it, and it was working. So she was just going to ride in behind and take the credit. And then at the last minute, something very bad happened.
Right.
And she didn't know what to do. So she reverted to her sort of evil ways of do everything you can to keep him alive so this happens. She's going to turn around the next day and go, oh, crap. My trusted person is now gone. Now what?
Okay, that's a great take. I thought she would be much more capable on her own.
I don't think so.
Was she just didn't have the facts at hand, as it were?
Well, I think that's the other possibility.
Yeah.
Which, too, would make sense if he'd been the ones doing all the talks.
Right.
And maybe she didn't bother to read any of the briefings because, he's got it.
Exactly. This leads on to point number 3. So she didn't read the briefings. Maybe she hadn't been following it.
Well, it's boring.
Right. Now, perhaps the reason for that was because she thought she was sending Bariel on a fool's errand.
Oh.
She thought there was no chance of this happening.
Yeah.
It was a pointless task that would take years, be frustrating, and here's the important bit, keep him out of the way.
I don't think so.
Bariel is competent, very committed, and shockingly actually managed to find common ground with the Cardassians.
Maybe. I guess that's possible, but we don't have enough info. It's hard to say.
Because seeing how petty Winn is, I think she'd be perfect talking to the Cardassians. But I love your idea that really she got to this position by cheating, and she isn't that great at it. That's a new take for me. I just assumed that all the Kais ended up getting there by some kind of method like her.
Oh, well, maybe. No, I'm not sure that that's what's going on. I don't think that she was trying to set him aside, because even he said, oh, she's listening to me.
Yeah.
I guess it was a couple episodes ago at this point.
Yes.
I guess I believed him because he seemed smart enough to know if he was being used in that way.
Yes, and that scene where he says, oh, I agree with your decision there.
Right. He's like, wise decision or whatever, and it was his thing. Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, he knew how to work with her.
Yeah.
Interesting. And this is kind of a side note here of the worst thing I think about this is I feel Winn is someone who would almost certainly prey on the very genuine faith and commitment of someone like Bariel. He would genuinely try to do his best in any situation and seem to be this good, honest, decent character. And I see Winn just manipulating him or using him for her own ends. But I don't know if that's really fair, because I suppose he would be saying, I'm following the will of the prophets, as he's so faithful.
Right. I think that's another example of something that they don't give us enough info on. So it's really difficult to know.
Right. I think you and I see it slightly differently.
Yes.
Because it isn't cut and dried.
Yeah.
So with the great Kai Winn and her amazing peace treaty out the way that she worked on all on her own, I'm sure that's what the history books will say.
I'm sure that is what the history books will say.
The final point is, sabotage.
Yeah.
Was the shuttle sabotaged or not?
Yeah, that's my question too. That was my last note, was they sort of dropped that question of sabotage. Did it actually happen? Miles made it sound like it was just a matter of time, that there was something worn out on the shuttle, so maybe they were actually just doing improper maintenance. But she asked the question after he said that.
Right.
They just dropped it and never brought it up again.
And she went straight there as well.
She did, because she knew that, as they said earlier, some of the hardliners were not in favor of what was happening. And so, it's the hardliners who might cause a shuttle accident.
Right. And I thought, if it was the Cardassians, I would expect them to take more of a direct approach. Just put a really big bomb on the shuttle and then blame it on the Conmar, because they were total extremists.
Who's the Conmar?
The freedom fighters from episode 2.
Oh, wow. Okay. Sure. Yeah, I think that's what they would have done. If they had blown it up, they would have definitely found a way to blame Bajorans for it. Yeah.
Oh, look, there's a body of a Conmar terrorist was found on the shuttle.
Yep. Very strange. Didn't bring it up again.
So it's suspicious, but it's unconfirmed.
Yeah. Anything else?
And I think that pretty much wraps it up with me.
Well, let's move to women in the future. I don't have a lot of things to say that we haven't already said. I do think they were showing that Kai Winn really isn't prepared for the role she's in, and that she truly did have to rely on Bariel. I mean, that was my take on it and my impression. And I like that because it shows a person more realistically, because I just don't think you can be great at everything.
She's not a supervillain.
She's not a supervillain, at least not without some of her sidekicks, like Frank Langella. Or, somebody like that. I think without sidekicks, she's actually relatively weak, and she doesn't seem to have a lot of really broad plans. She has very small, specific plans that she puts into action. But I think this was too big for her. And I kind of like that maybe her weakness is just that she's really not qualified for this job. I just found that sort of interesting. I don't know if that will play out in the future, but I kind of like that.
I've never considered that before.
Well, and then is the nonsense with Nog and Jake and how nobody stood up for the girls and nobody did anything about that. I really did not like that. And I think I've made my point already on that topic. And then the conversation with Sisko, I found so frustrating. That was the opportunity for the lesson. And he's always giving Jake lessons, and he doesn't there. I agree with you that it was nice that he was honest, that, hey, I was wrong. You guys can be friends. That was nice, but it was so buried to me by this other problem that he really should have done something about. So I just found that frustrating.
He didn't address the elephant in the room.
He didn't. Yeah, so that was uncool. So that's really all that I have for Women in the Future. So let's go to rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral? What is your rating on this episode?
How can a Kai Winn episode be anything other than a thumbs up?
Yeah, she is very good. I always love her. I'm always in awe of her in terms of her acting for sure. But this episode was peculiar.
Yeah.
I think they really glossed over this brain replacement thing, first of all. There's a lot of science on Star Trek that can be very silly, but this was like that one step too far. I mean, if they can just replace parts of the brain, there's lots of other things in Star Trek that I think would be different.
Agreed.
I just didn't like how they did that. And even every time he kept doing things like, oh, I replaced the organs and now he's awake. I replaced his brain and now he's awake. Oh, but I don't want to replace this other part of the brain because that's one step too far. Oh, by the way, this positronic matrix thing, Data couldn't get that working. So you're trying to tell me that Bashir could get it working? That was not right. I did not agree with that.
It was only part of a positronic matrix.
Oh, that was a struggle. I did appreciate how Bariel was just gone at the end. You know, there weren't any words of wisdom or last second declarations because that's not how people die. People just die, and it's awful, and it's horrible, and it's stark, and it's sad, and they did that here. And I thought that was really interesting and not something they do very frequently in fiction. It does happen, but it's not very frequent. So that I thought was strong, and obviously everything Kai Winn did was strong. So I don't know what to give this episode.
Really?
I like parts of it. I didn't like parts of it. I don't want to give it a neutral because I don't have neutral feelings about it.
Yeah.
I feel very strongly about some of it. I just think I have to give it a thumbs down.
Wow.
I don't know. I'm really struggling with this one. I might come back to it later and go, oh no, it's just a slight thumbs up.
I am honestly surprised by that.
I don't know.
What holds you back from the thumbs up?
The science was really lame, I thought. I just didn't like that stuff with Bashir replacing his brain.
Okay, that's funny because I filed all of that under classic TV medical drama, i.e., it's garbage.
Yeah.
And I just was prepared to let that go.
I guess I was thinking about Data and his daughter who couldn't survive. Yeah. And I was thinking about the way the Picard series ended. Yeah. And I don't know. A lot of stuff came together.
Oh, so you think other things may have influenced you negatively towards this?
Well, why couldn't they have just fixed Picard's brain problem if this is possible? If he's just replacing parts of the brain with no problem.
Well, I have a little defense of this here. If you remember, Lol, Data's daughter, her brain didn't actually work correctly in the long term.
No.
And perhaps the point here was that Bashir could put this positronic implant in to keep Bariel alive, but he'd only get a couple of weeks out of it. It would fail in the same way. So it's not that Bashir is smarter than anyone else or can handle the technology. It's just he hasn't run into the same problems yet, which were going to ultimately break his work.
Well, if we put that aside, if we put the science part to the side, and we put the nonsense with Nog and Jake to the side, and we just focus on what happened with Bariel and what happened with Kai Winn, I do think this is a thumbs up episode because I can feel that it's a step in a particular direction. I think it was important, actually, for Kira to somehow lose Bariel. I don't know if it needed to happen this way, but I think that was kind of important for the development of the long-term story. So it was bound to happen. I guess this is my history of watching soap operas. It was bound to happen that relationship wasn't going to last. So I think this was probably a pretty interesting way for it to happen and how they sort of snuck in there with nobody knowing that these negotiations were going on. And this nuance of Kai Winn not being quite ready was actually written, I thought, really well. And I quite appreciated that. And this was like, to me, such a different side of her. And when Bashir was calling her a coward, and I was just going, oh, what is he doing? And I wanted to defend her, which is so peculiar that we've arrived there, you know? So I think if I can put those other things aside, I can give this episode a thumbs up.
So have I changed your mind?
I flip-flopped, I guess. Which again means maybe it's just a neutral, but boy, this episode's a struggle.
You got to just wipe out all the medical stuff.
Is it fair to say I just wanted parts of it to be better?
That's a valid summary or criticism, suggestion.
Okay. Kira was very good in this episode, but they got to fix her hair.
I wonder as well at the end with Kira, if this is the first time she's lost someone in a non-violent way. Even when she lost Kai or Parker, it's because she was crushed in a crash.
Well, if it was sabotage, it was a violent way. And I mean, the accident was still violent.
But he wasn't shot, blown up, died of his injuries from a crash. That's sort of what I mean there.
I think this is worse.
Yeah.
Because he was just gone.
True.
I don't think we should do a podcast about grief.
Honestly, though, Kira just needs a break.
Yeah, I don't think she's going to get one. She has like these little moments of happiness and then someone kidnaps her and turns her into a Cardassian.
Yeah. Or she's officiating at the renewal festival and her boyfriend goes crazy.
Oh, she was so happy in that episode.
I know.
And then she wasn't. But then she was again at the end.
There was that.
Well, this has been a tough episode.
Yes, without a doubt. This has probably been the toughest episode this season.
Yes, I would agree with that.
I think I have exhausted all my points on this.
Me too. Okay, that brings us to the end of episode 13. Come back next week for episode 14. In the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own overanalysis of this or any episode, please email us at rebingeit@gmail.com or tweet us at rebingeit. Also, you can check us out on talkthroughmedia.com where you can leave feedback for individual episodes and you can listen to the other podcasts in our network.
Thanks for joining us on the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.